Hello, and welcome to Obsessive Gaming Episode 1. In this series I will be talking about gaming in general, role-playing in particular, and whenever I can squeeze it into the conversation I will rant on about my own obsession cross-genre role-playing system. My name is Gavin. Online I'm sometimes known as Hintfishy, and in addition to being the writer of Obsession, I'm one of the webmasters at the front for organised gaming. Over the course of this series I'm going to be covering some basic games mastering techniques, a few more advanced games mastering techniques, and some specific advice for running the Obsession and Axe role-playing games. In addition, we may cover some other forms of gaming here and there. In this first episode I'm going to give you a brief introduction to the Obsession game system. We'll cover what it is, what it does, why it does it, how it does it, and why you should play it. You will find this considerably easier if you first go to obsessiongame.co.uk and download the Obsession in One Page document, which can be found there. In addition to a one-page description of the core mechanics of the game, this also includes a sample character in the form of a generic henchman from a fantasy setting. With Joseph's aid, we can explain how those mechanics actually work. So if you have your one-page sheet and we're all sitting comfortably, then we'll begin. The one-page primer is divided into two columns. The left-hand column, column 1, gives you a basic rundown on how the core mechanics work. The right-hand column presents you with slightly more advanced topics and introduces the way in which the rules from the left-hand column are actually used in play. Looking down the left-hand column then, we see that the first item is on characters, monsters, and artifacts. In Obsession, everything belongs to one of these three categories. Artifacts are common or garden non-living items such as your sword, your gun, or your car, along with living but unintelligent artifacts such as trees or cabbages. The definition of intelligence we are using here largely comes down to self-awareness. With the exception of a few extremists, I think we can all agree that cabbages are not aware. If you cut a cabbage in half, the cabbage knows nothing about it. A cat or a dog, on the other hand, is a very different matter. Try the same trick with one of those, and the results will be rather different. This is because cats and dogs, far from being artifacts, are instead monsters. The easiest definition of a monster is quite simply a self-aware creature which is not important enough to be a character. Characters, to coin a phrase, are where it's at. In Obsession, these are fully detailed entities. They have attributes, skills, a description. They have a lot of detail put into them, and they're important to both the setting and the game. For most NPCs and creatures, this level of detail simply isn't necessary, and so these are categorized as monsters. Monsters have a reduced set of attributes. In some cases, they don't even have all of the standard monster attributes. They only have those which are needed for their role in the game. Although what we're talking about here is a part of the Obsession game system, this classification actually happens on an unconscious level in every game. Your characters in, say, Pathfinder are more detailed and more important than the orcs which they're going to be killing when they get to the dungeon. In Obsession, all we've done is clarify these classifications. It's a trick which players can usually ignore. Now that we know about characters, monsters, and artifacts, often abbreviated to karma, we can move on to the attributes. Obsession's attributes are grouped into three types: primary attributes, derived attributes, and finally special attributes. Primary attributes are used to describe a character. You can talk about how strong somebody is, or how fast they are, or how large. Each of these things will have some meaning to the person you're talking to, and this makes them all primary attributes. While equally important to the character, derived attributes are less useful in a narrative sense. Their use tends to be purely mechanical within the game. Finally come the special attributes. These are attributes not normally possessed by other characters or monsters or artifacts. Traits such as a dragon's ability to breathe fire, or a vehicle's ability to move under its own power, might not be possessed by other monsters or other artifacts, and therefore they fall under the category of special attributes. Before we leave them, however, let's look at something which seems to be a contradiction in terms: standard special attributes. A lot of karmas possess skills, talents, powers, fallbacks, incompetencies, flaws, and complications. enough so that these are considered standard special attributes. They can be found across a wide range of different karmas. With the exception of skills, these are things which other games might call advantages and disadvantages. Talents, powers and fallbacks make you better at skills, grant new abilities to you, or give you some advantage in the world around you, while incompetencies, flaws and complications are the opposite, making you worse at skills, taking away an ability you should have, or giving you some debt or disadvantage in the world. Finally, skills, a common concept in many games, are also considered a special attribute, the most common special attribute to be found in games of obsession. So now that we have our attributes, how do we use them? In obsession there are two types of die roll, dice pool rolls and saving throws. The second of these, saving throws, will be most familiar to people who have played other games. This is a simple percentile die roll, generating a number between 1 and 100 to get equal to or less than a value, that value generally being derived from one of the character's attributes. Saving throws come in 6 levels, with a level 3 save having a value equal to the attribute. Lower level saves use a higher value, higher level saves use a lower one. Saving throws are a simple pass-fail proposition. If you don't roll low enough, the Games Master will tell you what happens. Unless you're told otherwise, saving throws are always at level 3. Dice pool rolls are a rather different beast. There are 3 types of dice pool roll in Obsession: skill rolls, attribute rolls, and combined rolls. However, all 3 use the same basic mechanic. So whenever we use the term dice pool roll, it's something that applies to all 3 types of roll. To make a dice pool roll, you roll a number of 10-sided dice equal to your dice pool. In this example, we will use a dice pool equal to Joseph's agility plus his swords skill. Note that we are not using Joseph's full agility value, which would be 51 dice, but his skill value, which is a rather more manageable 3. When we add the 3 dice from his swords skill, we have 6 dice to roll. Having rolled them, we compare each die individually to a threshold number, rather than adding them together. Since we haven't been told otherwise, we assume that our threshold number is the standard 4. This means that of the dice that we've rolled, a 1, a 3, 2 6s, an 8, and 10, 4 of them are higher than our threshold number, and 2 of them lower. The 4 which are higher count as successes. It didn't happen here, but if one of the dice had rolled equal to the threshold number, that would have been a failure. You have to exceed the threshold to succeed. One of our dice, however, was a little bit special. We rolled a 10. 10s in Obsession explode, which means that when you roll a 10, not only does it count as a success, provided of course that it does count as a success, but you can also roll it again for an additional possible success. When we re-roll our die, we get a 4. As we've already said, 4 is equal to the threshold number, doesn't exceed it, and therefore doesn't count as an additional success. Each die can only explode once, so if we'd rolled another 10, we wouldn't have been allowed to re-roll the die a second time. Nevertheless, the 4 successes that we got is a pretty solid result, so the odds are Joseph will live to fight another day. That brings us to the end of Column 1, and indeed the end of Episode 1. In Episode 2, I'll move on to the second column and explain a few more advanced concepts. If Obsession didn't float your boat, however, don't worry, because we'll be moving on to some other games, and indeed to some basic games mastering techniques later on in the series. In the meantime, this is me, Fishy, signing off, and on behalf of everybody at Obsessive Compulsive Design, the front for organised gaming, and hobby gamers in Thanet, we wish you some happy gaming.